Hey everybody, it's Jane Johnston with the Bar Hill Group at Remax Quilson. Today I'm here with
Hey everybody, it's Andrew Plank with LePage. Good morning.
awesome eye contact there. Love it.
Awesome. What's
Eye contact when
eye
you're
contact?
looking
I'm
right at
looking
the
at
camera.
you.
So how was your week?
Good week. I had had some good visits with family, and I've got a couple closings coming up today. So I get to go. It's key day. Get to go give keys. It's super fun. And
Awesome.
yeah, how about you?
Uh, t- well, as we were talking just before we started, I've been working a lot with buyers lately, and it's a bit frustrating on the buying side, being one of many.
Yeah,
Um, And I totally get it. Like it's good to work both sides of the market actually, because that way you see what buyers perceive and you also see what sellers want.
yeah.
So
I just want to check in on something you said. It's not always frustrating working with buyers, but right now in this current climate, it's freaking frustrating working with buyers simply because there's nothing to find, right?
it's actually not frustrating working with buyers. It's frustrating and offering on properties and being one of many.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
Just
what
wanted to
it's
clarify that. So the
yeah,
buyers out there aren't going like, what, we don't like buyers?
no, I love working with buyers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm finding that I sit there and I go, God, 3 years ago, we could just offer and get it. And
We
now
could.
we're one of many.
Yes, we could. Because, well, we're going to go into the stats, but there's reasons for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at the market 2 years ago, just before COVID happened, it was funny because we were in a buyer's market, more of a buyer's market. And so, you go out and show people, they'd say they want to see 10 properties and we get into 7. Now we are doing one-offs. So it's a lot more energy for a buyer agent. And there's a meme that's funny about that.
Yeah.
The Barbie meme.
It's a lot more tail wagging the dog now because instead of being, setting up, as you said, a number of showings with a client saying, okay, on Wednesday, we're going to go out and we're going to look at, 10 properties, and we make our requests and maybe 7 get back that they're available for those showings. We can actually show a reasonable number of properties to our clients without having to jump to the tune of the market so quickly. Now, with it so quick, when something comes up, we need to jump into it as soon as we possibly can. We need to get an offer in if it's not holding off offers. If it is holding off offers, we still need to prep something because of the bully offers, just to be prepared. But I don't know about you, but I find that people are calling me really desperate to get in. And I'm telling people, don't wait to get in till
What's
Wednesday.
hilarious is when we go and see a property and they go, "What do you think it's going to sell for?" I'm like, there really aren't any comparables in this market because in a rising market, we're already looking at the past. But I say we have to see what the strategy is on the day of the offer.
I think I've talked about games theory in the past, and there's, the idea of like part of this idea of what are other properties worth in this market is you have to anticipate what other people are going to think it's worth. And what are people going to be offering? What's the price points that people are going to offer? And you can kind of, with enough experience, you can kind of in your head and in your, do some work to say, this is where the market shows it has been in the past. But with this much activity on it and based on the price point of the seller, they're probably anticipating this. And if you want it, you're probably going to have to go just a little bit higher.
Do you give them a number? I don't give my clients a number.
I give numbers for, I think it's safe to say, I think if you offer this, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting it. If you offer this, you've got a 90% chance of getting it. There's no 100% chance of getting it because somebody else is giving other advice, but
Yeah,
that's what I do. Yeah.
I give them 3 choices. I'm like, this is the 50, this is the 75, and this is the 95. And
The
so,
percentages. Yeah.
yeah, and you
Okay.
can go in, especially at the beginning. They'll be like, let's go in here.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few, they're like, I got the feel of this thing. But I find I'm reticent to give an exact number because I don't want to spend somebody else's money if they
No.
don't want, they
Well,
want to win it.
and we've all seen as listing agents, we've all seen properties that sell dramatically wide gap between the highest offer and the second highest offer. And so that the highest offer could have offered less and still won the property. Potentially. The seller may not accept it. They're not accepting offers above asking price some days. Just depends on where the moon and stars are at. But yeah, you do see that gap. But then that's where the percentages come in. And there are certain people and some buyers that either evolve or they stay where they're stuck where they are. If they stay stuck, they're going to be always at the 10% chance of winning because they're never offering what they should. And that 10%, they think, well, eventually I'll get something. I offer 10 offers, I'm going to get one. But no, if you're always coming in low, there's just pretty much that 10% is probably really not a realistic number.
So, let's look at the numbers and see what's happening.
Yeah. What is happening out there, Jane?
Well, funny you should ask, Andrew. Here we are. I'll just bring this a little bigger. Okay. So I'll do the top part. We have 603. So we're actually, it's November 29th, Monday morning market update with Andrew and Jane. We have 603 net unconditional sales. So we're near the end of the month. This is going to be pretty much it. And 795 last year. So we are down over last year, but we also are down in inventory. New listings just at 659 compared to 823 last year, and overall active listings at 936 compared to 1813 last year.
Half of last year. And again, broken record, but last year was still low inventory.
Yep.
And what's interesting is, so you look at this, we had 2/3 of what we kind of have for inventory sell in the last month. We're rolling over our inventory pretty dramatically. We're staying, we're this number at 936, it's gone from the last couple of months from 1,100 to 1,000 to 936. It's just going lower and lower. And come December, it's going to be much lower. So interesting. So Market Watch, what happened in the last week? We had 146 new listings go on market with 152 properties go pending. So of the active listings, 152 went to pending. 16 price decreases, 2 price increases, 3 properties came back on market after having been withdrawn or taken off market for a short time. 10 expired. I'm reading that wrong. 10 properties expired. So again, people can still overprice their listings and not get a sale. And 1 was withdrawn. Any comments on those, Jane?
I did get asked by a newer realtor this week whether or not relisting a listing was a good idea or not. And I was saying to her that sometimes in the realtor.ca, you do see that people can click off only new listings, so they may not see your property if they've just come in to start looking. And that's why sometimes you see expired listings or withdrawn listings, because people are relisting it. So the purpose of that is to bring attention to it again. And so it comes up again in the search. And this is just also what they may do is change the picture on the front. So
different things you can do to try to give a little bump in recognition. Changing the picture in the front is just because if you've been scanning through listings and you see the same thing over and over again, you start to discount it, or it just goes into background mode. So just switching up that might give somebody oh, that's a new property. That's something I haven't seen before. And it's amazing how important photos are.
Yeah. And, just looking at the numbers overall here, we see we're outselling again. So we're not going to see an increase in inventory, I don't think, until the new year.
No. I think we will see some pretty big bumps in the new year. I think there are definitely people waiting to list. And then that strategy you mentioned, I just circle back on that for anybody. You mentioned that we do get some new agents watching us as well as, the general public and experienced agents. Hi, everybody. We were given, advice in the past, when you want to relist a property that's been on market, let's say 2 weeks, it had maybe a false start for whatever reason. Maybe there was an offer that was placed on the property, it was conditional and it fell apart, and you want to relaunch with a fresh start. Don't cancel the listing, change the expiry date. It's just a better way of protecting yourself and the agent if you're from some of the provisions where if you expire it early, there's still protections for you if it sells to somebody that you brought in as a result of your activities. Whereas if you cancel it, you've actually canceled the contract. So expiring it still protects you some ways. So expire it early, so you do a change order and then relist. It's a little subtlety, but that might be why I'm saying this too, because it might be why we're seeing those expiries. But I do also think that there are truly overpriced properties out there, people who are, missing the mark, and they are truly expiring after a 3-month, 2-month, 6-month period.
Well, also it's the end. It's like the Monday before December, and many people are deciding to take their house off the market. Mm-hmm. So you're just going to find people are just going to wait because they want to enjoy their Christmas and not, worry about showings. That being said, last year when I had a listing that was having difficulty selling, I said to them, just keep it on because everyone's going to take theirs off. And so it sold. So you want to be one of a few in terms of listings, not one of many. So it's actually a great time to sell.
Supply demand, right? Really, really high demand, low supply. You're going to get a lot of people coming through your doors. Come spring, still going to have high demand, but the supply will be higher. So it'll spread it out. You're laughing at me again. Jane laughs
No,
at
I'm
me.
not laughing. I just think it's funny. It's funny, the nuances of real estate. So the other thing is if you are going from a major price bracket to another price bracket, it is better to relist it. So like if you're going from $1 million to under $1 million, you're just going to reach a whole different crowd by doing this. So we suggest, anyway, talk to your realtor about the pricing strategy.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have tools too, where we can do a little search, and it'll, plug in the price of the property that we have listed and adjust the price by $5,000 increments, $10,000 increments, 25. And you can see how many more or less people will be showing up on a search. And it's interesting because sometimes by lowering the price by $10,000, you hit a new price threshold and you open up way more buyers for that property. And that puts so much more demand on that property that it then pumps back up, and otherwise it sits there. And sometimes I've actually seen where by raising the price a bit, it catches more eyes. There are certain price stratas, you might say, where there are more buyers than others.
Yeah, although when somebody says that to me, I don't know, it makes me wonder. Anyway, there's a lot of thought that goes into the number I give people on listing. So, all right, let's look at this. We are going to review property disclosures. So we have two different types of property disclosure statements. One's for strata and the other one is for single family homes. And
those two main types, because we also have like bare land stratas, and isn't there a mobile home type one as well? I mean, there's a few kind of rarer ones out there. Anyway, the Victoria Real Estate Board has these two mainly.
Okay, so I'm just going to read a few statements off of here so that everybody understands. So it's designed in part to protect the seller by establishing all relevant information concerning the property has been provided to the buyer. It is important that the seller not answer, do not know, or does not apply if in fact the seller knows the answer. An answer must provide all relevant information known to the seller. In deciding what requires disclosure, the seller should consider whether the seller would want the information if the seller was a potential buyer of the unit. The buyer must still make their own inquiries. And after receiving the property disclosure statement, each question and answer must be considered keeping in mind that the seller's knowledge of the unit and development may be incomplete. So this is like if somebody's not involved in the strata and they're asked to disclose information, or they haven't lived there over the past 5 years and
Yeah.
they've been asked to disclose about recent levies.
Let's
Additional
sorry. Are you reading this whole thing? Or
I'm going to read most of it because
okay.
I read it earlier. It made I think it'll give it context. Additional information can be requested from the seller or from an independent source, such as the municipality, regional district, or the strata. The buyer can hire an independent licensed inspector or other professional to examine the unit or the development and/or improvements to determine whether defects exist and to provide an estimate of the cost of repairing problems that have been identified. So that's because sometimes you will negotiate down after you find something. So there's 6 important considerations. Do you want to read them?
No, but I'll.
The seller is legally responsible for the accuracy of the information which appears on the property disclosure statement. Not only must the answers be correct, but they must be complete. The buyer will rely on this information when the buyer contracts to purchase the property. Even if the, I'll just call it PDS, is not incorporated into the contract of purchase and sale, and we always do that, it's on addendum 1, the seller will still be responsible for the accuracy of the information on the PDS if it's caused the buyer to agree to buy the unit. The buyer must still make the buyer's own inquiries concerning the unit in addition to the PDS, recognizing that in some cases it may not be possible to claim against the seller if the seller cannot be found or is insolvent. Anyone who is assisting the seller to complete a PDS should take care to see that the seller understands each question. And I do find actually now that we're doing more of these over
Zooms and things.
Yeah, that we actually probably get better answers because it's more of a discussion.
Yeah.
It's recommended that the seller complete the PDS in the seller's own writing to avoid any misunderstanding. And so what I found, though, is sometimes the seller doesn't understand the question.
Yeah, and we do often see property disclosure statements as buyer's agents that have been obviously filled out improperly. And, we've seen the house. We can see what's going on there. And they've answered a question through a misunderstanding, and it's pretty clear. And it's best to get that corrected by the listing agent. But you can kind of tell. And that's the challenge with these property disclosure statements is they're disclosure by the seller, but they're not necessarily, they're not professionally filled out. The sellers may live in the home, but they don't. Some of these questions are complex.
Yeah.
Now,
in a strata with the underground oil storage tank, often a buyer or seller, doesn't know.
I want to take a step back here and just sort of talk about maybe how this developed, because when we list properties, buyers have lots of questions, and in the past, property disclosure statements started becoming a practice, partly as a result of buyers, having frequently asked questions. Thanks, Cliff, for that. That was in relation to an earlier parts of the discussion. I don't know what part of the discussion he thought was nothing changes, but things. There's lots of truisms in this business. They just stay the same. Anyway, property disclosures have sort of developed over time. They started out really simple, and they've developed as we've sort of seen more and more questions come about. Most recently, we've seen the number of questions about radon, which when you ask your clients questions about radon, they go, what the heck is this? We don't even know what radon is. So we see this develop over time. Our real estate board has made a requirement that these property disclosure statements get listed with the listing, that they be posted with the listing. They don't have a requirement that they be completed or filled out. They just have a requirement that they be posted. And we will see them sometimes posted, because there's pros and cons for a seller making disclosures. Because if you can't accurately disclose, you put yourself at risk. On the other hand, if you don't disclose, yes. But if you don't disclose, buyers will be concerned. Go ahead, Jane, sorry.
Right. So the reason why this came up was we had a client interested, not Andrew and me, but just me, who was interested in purchasing a property. And we went to review the property disclosure, and we saw it was closed out. And they were advised by a real estate lawyer that they should never fill these out. And what was interesting was my buyer said to me, well, if it's not filled out, I don't want to buy it, because obviously this person has lived here, and she didn't trust the fact that they weren't willing to fill it out. This buyer is going to be listing her own property. She's going to fill it out.
Mhm.
Because what buyers consider it kind of comforting that a seller has at least tried to fill it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, nobody wants to go to court and haggle over what somebody's intention was in filling something out and whether it was right or wrong or what have you. But this does get incorporated into the contract, 99 times out of 100, and forms part of the contract, gets all initialed by the buyers and sellers. And so it is something that is deemed to be relied upon. It doesn't, as Jane read earlier, it doesn't take away the buyer's responsibility to do their own due diligence. And it's also, by not crossing it out, it doesn't take away the seller's responsibility to disclose what is called a material latent defect. So you can't avoid those legal responsibilities.
Right. And part of this, like in a strata, part of it is regarding the land, part of it is regarding the building, and then part of it is regarding your unit. So the land, usually I would say a buyer, or a seller, unless they've been on the strata, probably doesn't know of existing tenancies or anything like that. And but as they start to talk about the building, there's going to be issues that will come up in strata discussions. And so when a buyer is looking at a strata, they're looking at the past 2 years, but there may be issues that have been happening for a long time. So some of the questions are you aware of any structural problems with any of the buildings in the development? Are you aware of any problems with heating or central air conditioning, damage due to wind, fire, or water, any infestation, or unrepaired damage by insects, rodents, or bat? Any leakage or unrepaired damage. So like, for instance, I had a seller there was a crack in the foundation of the garage, and the strata had been watching it for 10 years. And so we disclosed it in the property disclosure statement, so that when the buyer went, this is before now where people read them before offers, but when the buyer went to review, it wasn't a surprise. So sometimes it's not what they find out, it's when they find it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is why I mean, there's pros and cons on getting a pre-inspection on a house, but being able to outline and provide awareness in advance of potential problems means that when a buyer does make their offer, if let's say it is a conditional offer, when they're not going to have this surprise that's going to cause them to walk away. They're already aware of anything that could have caused them to walk away, and they're going to make a more realistic offer, pro or con on that. But
yeah, and I find that a professionally managed stratas, generally the people know more about what's going on with the building, other than usually there's a small group that knows.
Well, professionally managed is hopefully guided by a professional who's given them advice to look under certain rocks and to do certain things that keep them in compliance. Whereas self-managed they don't know what they don't know, and they just continue to run perhaps less organized.
Exactly. So I've had 2 of those recently, and there is definitely a difference between professionally managed and managed by the strata president, essentially. So this is interesting because it's the special assessments paid in the past 5 years, which maybe a seller may not be aware of. But it's important because
why would the seller not be aware if they've paid a special assessment in the past 5 years? You'd think they would be.
Because if they haven't lived there for up to 5 years.
Well, if they've only owned it for 2, the question is, have you paid any special assessments in the past 5 years? So I think
Right.
it's okay. Although, if they own multiple condos and you want to take it literally, you can, never mind. Oh, I loved seeing the head shake.
Well, I mean, sometimes this is important because you know what? Okay, what happens is you're with a buyer and they want to write an offer on a property. And so you're looking at the property disclosure, you're trying to figure out if they've paid any special assessments or whether or not there's any proposed, which is a
Mhm.
good idea. And then what you're trying to do also is figure out what plan they're following if they've got a depreciation report. So often those special assessments tell you what plan they're following. They're a
That's a good
clue.
point. Yeah, right. You can align up the 2 dates and say, okay, it looks like they paid special assessments these dates, and the depreciation report is lined up for special assessments on these dates as well, or not, because
Yeah.
there's 3 scenarios. Anyway, off topic.
Often also people ask, what does the strata fee include? And that's answered on the property disclosure statement, which is important because some stratas include heat, some include hot water, some include hot water heat, some include the gas,
Yep.
and most of them include sewer and gardening and water management.
At the same time, though, I find this is often filled out incorrectly, and reviewing the strata financials will give you some good hints as to what may or may not be covered. If you see a large Fortis gas bill, then it's likely that gas fireplaces are included because they're not burning anything else for gas, perhaps. If you see large water bills or heating bills, hydro that is, if you don't see a hot water tank in the unit, they probably have a central boiler. But so there's things you kind of, I would say you treat this as something. This is how I treat the property disclosure statement, as a document that warrants further investigation.
Right. Have you ever seen a reserve fund study separate from a depreciation report?
I consider them the same thing, although maybe they're technically different. The depreciation report is mandated, legislated as a depreciation report, but maybe people in the past were doing a reserve fund study that didn't really follow the same requirements. I'm not sure.
I
But
think
generally,
that's kind of redundant.
yeah.
And one thing is, if you're going to sell your place, know where your parking stall is and your storage locker.
Yes.
And listing realtors take pictures.
Very helpful. Yeah. No, it's very helpful. Go
Put
with
them
your
in a
client,
turn corner.
walk down there, have them point out their storage locker, take a picture of it. You don't always have access as a buyer's agent or have time, so it's nice to have that as background information. Some agents will send an info package when a showing is confirmed, and that info package includes, this is where the storage locker is, this is where the parking is, this is some of the background information you might not, see on your visit there, and it's helpful. It's very helpful. And Jane and I are both pretty good at doing that as well.
And it would be helpful if everybody read them. And I have to admit, sometimes I don't have time to read them, so it's not just me.
Nope, it's true.
Okay, radon. So this is more an issue, I think, with the interior. Coincidentally, I do have a friend who has cancer now, and turns out everybody on his street growing up also has cancer from
Wow.
yeah.
As a result of radon?
Well, living in a uranium-rich part of BC.
Okay. So radon is a radioactive gas that seeps up through the bedrock. It's heavier than air, but somehow, it comes up into your crawl spaces and basements and so on, and can sort of collect. So there's mitigation you can do by, putting in blowers or having some sort of ventilation system. It doesn't take a lot, is my understanding, to mitigate radon. But to the point of it's not really a problem here, my understanding is it hasn't really been fully investigated here, so we don't really know. And you can find maps of, there's a BC map of showing, areas that are more likely to have radon gas. But it is possible that there's areas of Victoria that could could be subject to radon gas. I think it's everywhere. It's just the question is how much
It's
gas is
usually
there.
if you have a rock or something in your crawl space, and if you go to a place like Oak Bay, or not Oak Bay, but older areas where they didn't blast a rock away, and it's just like you would literally have a rock. My neighbor has a rock in their basement, so just making sure that you're stirring up the air and allowing it to vent out. I think that's the mitigation system.
We're not experts on radon, but if you're at all, I mean, it is worth doing a little investigation into if you're at all curious. And I'm not sure if it matters if you're actually on rock or not, because if there's ground beneath you and it's bubbling up, it's going to bubble up.
If there's ground beneath you.
You could have a home on stilts. Water, you could have a houseboat. Come on.
Okay, this is an interesting one. Are you aware if the unit or any other unit of the development has been used to grow cannabis other than permitted by law? So interestingly, I had a client who, when I first met him, he was thinking of selling, and he had grown cannabis, and I was like, oh my God. And then by the time we listed his property, because he'd done it with a permit, it was no longer a latent defect, and he didn't have too many plants and all of that. So that was interesting. Just the change. Somebody once said, oh God, I can't remember the quote, but basically some things are illegal because of the law. It doesn't mean they're morally corrupt or whatever. It was just interesting.
Yeah.
Like alcohol being illegal during prohibition, right? And then so it's a question of the change of the values.
It's all a question of values there, but it's also, I mean, the intent of that question is around health and safety and in the home. And so for multiple reasons, I mean, not like cannabis grow up is one thing, and then there's drug operations is another, who's been coming and going around this home. But if it was, illegally, there's lots to that. But what you pulling up here? Oh,
this is the one for
when we first got licensed, Jane. This was before pot was legal, and we had to disclose if there'd even been just one plant in the property. You were supposed to say yes to it had been used for illegal grow, and then suddenly this property is
stigmatized forever.
Yeah, it's stigmatized, and the banks will look at it and say, "Oh, I can't loan on this," and so it was really confusing. It still is somewhat confusing because I guess legal is only a certain number of plants.
It's 4.
I don't grow it, so I don't know the numbers.
Well, the thing I didn't realize was how big a pot plant gets. But the other thing is they're saying this about marijuana, but other people grow other plants, and they have a greenhouse. The point is that if it's a greenhouse within your house and it's requiring a lot of water and heat, and you're increasing the humidity of the air, that's the issue, really.
Yeah, the issues with the illegal grow ops was people were bringing in lots of lights and power, and they were trying to hide it from the authorities. So it was often would have been done without permits. So I've seen some homes that were really just spaghetti wired and trashed because they had large grow operations inside them. So there's mold, there's faulty wiring, there's pulled apart drywall. It's really messy. So, I mean, the whole point again of this property disclosure statement is kind of like a launching point for further investigation. That's what I would say in all of this.
Exactly. And the one for houses is not quite as onerous. More, I find people are wondering about unauthorized accommodation. This is a great way to disclose it to buyers before they actually write an offer on a property, so that they're aware.
Yeah, and this can then actually be a protection. You could read this as a protection for the buyers when they can read through this and find information that could cause them to choose not to go forward with the purchase or cause them pause. This is also protection for the sellers. I mean, there's things built into our contracts already our first addendum to a standard contract says, the buyer is aware of the impact of any unauthorized accommodation and so on and so forth. But the fact that it's been disclosed to them also, it bolsters this protection for the seller to say, I'm selling this home. It's not got authorized accommodation. So don't come back to me and say, I sold this as being authorized. It's up to you to, determine how you're going to use this property, and you're accepting it as you find it.
Yeah, and what buyers perceive if a seller doesn't fill it out is it's a bit of a cop out, and where we see that they aren't filled out, though, and rightfully so, is if somebody's coming in to sell a property for their aunt or uncle or grandmother, then they haven't lived in the property. But also people who run rentals don't fill them out. The reason why is they aren't living in the property, although I would say, being a rental owner, I probably know more about that property than other properties, just because I'm always maintaining it.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to the lawyer advice that was given to one seller and they were told, you put yourself at risk by filling this out. It is, on one level, it's true. By filling something out and making additional disclosure above what is legally required of you, you are going to be holding yourself to a higher standard of accountability. But it's also true that by not filling it out, you run the risk of putting off buyers, and buyers may not be willing to offer as much for the home, or you may not get as many buyers for the home. So you have to balance what you're going to do around the property disclosure statement. And while the risk of making, and also what's the risk of making that disclosure? What's the risk of putting yourself at higher, but as Jane was saying, if it's an estate, if it's someone who isn't really familiar or hasn't lived in the property, it's better probably not to fill it out, because then you're not making disclosures that are actually potentially incorrect. And that's the worst thing.
Here's the story. So I had a client who we were interested in a house, and turns out it had an offer on it, and the offer had collapsed because the buyer found knob and tube wiring. So this is a long time ago, we go in to view the property, and the property disclosure statement, this is before it was all shared with people, is on the fridge, and the seller has added that there's knob and tube wiring. So my client writes an offer on the property, and we have an inspection, and of course we already know there's knob and tube, so that wasn't revealed, and so she didn't walk away from the property. Because sometimes what happens is people are looking for a reason to hesitate going forward. So and I've had sellers say to me, well, I don't want to disclose that, like that'll just turn them off. It'll turn them off if they find out after the offer that you haven't disclosed the stuff. So just be upfront, because people will, especially now, you don't want people to regret buying a home quickly if you don't disclose.
In a market where there's conditional offers, the worst thing that can happen for you is you have, you've launched, you've done all this lead up to prepare your property for market, you launch it to market, you go to multiple offers, and someone really wants your home, but the best offer is condition. You choose a conditional offer. It's subject to a building inspection. They do their building inspection, and then they find something inert almost, and that you might consider inert, or we as agents might see all the time, but for them it's a new thing. It's knob and tube wiring. Oh, there's some asbestos tape on the ductwork. It could be something that is fixable and considered kind of minor in some circles, or at least could be addressed. But for that buyer, it's just such a deal killer, or such an emotional change of heart for them, that they say, no, I'm not going forward. And now you've lost all that momentum, and you could have accepted an offer from someone else that would have been the second best, but still better than you're going to get once you go to a second round of offers, very likely, because now you've been on market for a week.
Yeah. And just to say, just to support that, sometimes people are looking at the highest priced offer, but you also have to look at which offer is going to go through, which, that's why the agent's important, because if you know how the agent negotiates for that person, and how they negotiate in general, you understand, okay, is this buyer going to flake out or not? Because sometimes if that first offer doesn't go through, and this is exactly why people relist, is you've lost that momentum, and then you've lost the market. So
Yeah.
when somebody has an accepted offer on a property, they really are taking it off the market for 7 to 10 days if it's conditional.
Once the seller accepts an offer, they can only take other offers as a backup position. They're beholden to sell to that first person, whether they get a better offer later or not. During that period, they can't sell to somebody else. They can only take it as a backup.
Yeah.
So it's really important that, yeah.
And many people won't do the backup now because they feel if they do, they won't be able to offer on another property.
That comes up of interest to them. Yeah.
I think we've pretty much exhausted this topic.
You think so?
If you guys have any questions, let us know.
Yeah.
So I thought what we could talk about, what we discussed late last week, was maybe insurance. We've been told recently that insurance may be on hold for some properties, especially in lower lying areas. So
this is interesting, and it's just sort of new news to us. So we don't really know much about this, or it's kind of hearsay, but we've been hearing from some of our colleagues that insurance companies are not insuring some closing, as a buyer's coming up to the closing, they go, I'm looking for insurance for my new property. I'm going to need it to complete. And the mortgage is going to require insurance to be in place for them to fund. But the insurance companies are saying, you know what, there's been a lot of rain lately, and we're just going to wait and see what happens a little bit more if there's another flood event, before we actually agree to insure these homes. I would be really surprised, Jane, because I used to work in insurance, and this is like another lifetime ago, like many, many years ago, like when I was 20. But insurance companies, insurance agents are fiduciaries just like realtors are. And once they've provided coverage, they can't kind of walk it back necessarily. So once if you've called up and you've arranged coverage, and you've got a binder saying, here, you're covered for these dates, I don't see how the insurance companies can walk it back.
I don't think that they're withdrawing. I think that they're not insuring new
files. Yeah.
So we'll find out. We'll get some maybe one or two insurance people here next week, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. And in the meantime, if you're watching this and you're watching the clouds, and you have a closing coming up in the next month or two, you might want to get on the phone and just solidify your insurance, just to make sure. There are some companies, I understand, that are not. Some companies that are still all new news to us, but worth kind of get that done.
So actually next week we're going to be doing our monthly market update. So we'll invite our local mortgage brokers to come on out and chat with us about what's going on in mortgage world.
Okay. So if we do find that insurance is really becoming an issue, we might add that to next week's topic, I think, just because it's timely, but otherwise we'll put it off for a week or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Andrew, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm here. So you can reach me give me a call, 250-360-6106, or text. Text is awesome. Or email me, info@andrewplank.com. You can check out my website, andrewplank.com. There's a great video there. It talks about how I operate. Don't Facebook message me. Don't Instagram message me. Don't LinkedIn message me. These are the main channels. Do those.
I find text messaging works best.
Yeah.
If people want to reach me, you can reach me at 250-744-0775. My email is briarhillgroup@gmail.com, and I have two websites. One is briarhillgroup.com, which talks about buying and selling, and Vancouver Island Time, which talks about neighbors and is a home for these videos. Don't forget, we are here every Monday, and we'd love to see you. So please subscribe.
You do it. You do it. Come on, do it. Thank you. Yes.
All right. So every Monday morning we're here. Please, please ask us questions. We were told last week that lots of people are watching, but they're not asking questions. and we can't see you all. So we'd love to know who's watching and how we can help you.
Yeah, we'd love to have more questions just because it gives us, something to launch from and creates a little more lively discussion. We're not always so lively.
Okay, you guys, take care. Have a great week, Andrew.
Thanks, Jane. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.